Okay, hi everyone. This is a pre-recorded theater funding clinic for the theater project budget template. So we'll just be going through the budget template and things to look out for. And sure, let's get started. Okay, so we're going to talk about the background to the template. We're going to talk about the three tabs that make up the template. That's budget detail, in-kind, income, and the summary. So there are three main reasons for the budget template. It's so that applicants know what type of budget details to provide, so that the budget of all applications are being assessed in the same way, and so that we can extract data and identify trends in terms of costs, income, numbers employed, audience numbers, etc. So it's basically designed to cover a full range of shows. So there's probably a whole lot of information than might be needed for a Strand 1 or a Strand 2 application. So we had talked about, okay, should we do a separate Strand 1 budget, separate Strand 2 budget, separate Strand 3 budget, separate Strand separate Strand 4 budget? But we ultimately decided, okay, maybe we just need to stick this one budget because to break it up might actually make things more complicated than they need to be. So the budgets you can find on artscouncil.ie. If you have a problem locating them, just drop us a line at theater@artscouncil.ie and we can direct you. So, yeah, like I was saying, you can find the funding template on the specific project award funding page. And it's usually nestled in right there next to the project award guidelines. Again, like I said, if you're having trouble finding it on the website, just drop us a line at theater@artscouncil.ie and we'll direct you. Okay, so like I said, we'll be going through the three tabs here. Budget detail, which covers income and expenditure, and then budget two, which is in-kind income, and sorry, tab two, which covers in-kind income, and then tab three, which covers the summary. So tab one looks like this. So in reality, it runs down a full page, but we've broken it up here. So you can kind of break it up and you can have a good look at it. So it's a lot, and if you are just starting out, it can look overwhelming. But the hope is that if you just look at it line by line, it'll hopefully start to get you thinking about what it is we're going to be looking for in terms of an assessment, and hopefully will help you understand, okay, so these are the kinds of things that I need to be thinking about as I put together the budget. So, at the top, at the very top of the budget, you'll see there is instructions, and that basically just goes through what to fill in, what not to fill in. So, please fill in the white cells only, and fill in cells that are only relevant to your proposal. So. We know that you may not need a choreographer, you may not have a movement coach or any other kinds of roles, but or if you're doing like a simple one-person show, you may not need different kinds of set costs, etc. So if there's a cost listed that isn't relevant to you, you can just leave it blank. You don't need to fill it in. Um, please don't fill in yellow cells or gray cells, or delete rows or columns, because to do so uh, would break up the embedded calculations. So the calculations wouldn't work if you were to delete a column or delete a row. So just be mindful of that. So we'll be looking at first the number section and the income section. But I just want to draw your attention that there's a section to the right there called notes and comments where relevant. And that's a space where you can leave notes. So if you want to explain how you arrived at a certain figure or why a certain figure is the way it is, you can offer an explanatory note there. Um, that section, that note section, is probably most useful, or something to think about if you're calculating figures for strand one or strand two, where the averages for fees as calculated by the budget template may not fully reflect what it is you're intending to pay collaborators. So the notes section is a space where you can flag that for us in this case. So I guess just to say that a lot of the calculations are geared towards productions or presentations of plays. So, for a development, you may be only doing like a couple of days or a week. So the calculations may not fully reflect what it is you're going to be paying collaborators for strand one or strand two. So the notes section is a place where you can indicate, okay, this is what we are going to be paying people for a week of development, or whatever. So it's just good to kind of tell the story or the narrative of the budget for your proposal. So the numbers section, and this is really important because the numbers that are inputted here are how the template will calculate figures below. So of course we have the numbers here for cast and performers, for stage management personnel, for freelance or creative personnel, the number of weeks pre-production and development, number of weeks rehearsal, number of performance weeks, number of performances. So basically, the top three rows are going to be relevant for pretty much strand one through strand four. Depending on the different types of roles and collaborators that you have for your project. For the row there that says number of weeks pre-production slash development. So pre-production, obviously may be relevant for strand three or strand four because you're going to be dealing with the preparations for production. For strand three or strand four, development is not an eligible cost because the expectation is the project that you're going to be staging will have already been developed to rehearsal ready stage. This line for number of weeks pre-production slash development for strand one or strand two, this is most relevant to you. So that any kind of week or weeks development that you can be doing for a strand one or strand two, you can input that here. Um, so you can input that there. So you don't want to put anything, and this is for strand one or strand two, just to be clear, you don't want to put anything in number of weeks rehearsal, number of performance weeks, number of performances, because if you're doing that for a strand one or strand two, it's going to throw the calculations off. So basically, for everything that you're doing for a strand one or strand two, you can just put into the number of weeks pre-production development. Um, let's see if there's anything else. Nope. For strand three, strand four, just kind of moving on, when you do input the numbers for numbers of weeks, rehearsal, number of performance weeks, number of performances, that allows the template to calculate like your box office income and audience targets, etc. And it'll also break down the total salaries further down in the sheet. Okay, so this is the income section. So this is what will serve as your box office income calculator. So the first cell you fill in there, and of course the only cells that you can fill in are going to be the white ones. The yellow cells will already have calculations embedded within them. So the first cell you'll fill in are the venue capacity. The number of performances, like I said, that'll be pulled in from the numbers section above that we just covered. And then you give yourself a percentage of your target audience. This section is only for presentations. So it's only for strand three and four. If it's strand one or two that you're applying for, this isn't relevant to you, so don't worry about it. Now, capacity is going to depend on the kind of show that you're going to be producing. So you may have a big show that's ambitious in scale, or you may have like a really small, intimate show. And I guess as an example, we might hold up the work of Anu as a theater company because that kind of work they can tend to make work that's will have a large number of performances, but only a small number of people can see each individual show, so they can expect their capacity to be very high. Whereas, say, if you're doing a show in Project Art Center, you might be looking at maybe a 55% audience target for a new work, or you might be more ambitious than that target or less ambitious, depending on the nature of the work, or where you gauge where your attendance target might be. I guess the point is that this is not about you demonstrating that you can sell as many seats as possible. The point is to demonstrate that you've thought about who the audience is for the show and what an appropriate scale of work that is. We're not necessarily saying that we expect you to fully sell out or anything like that. Inputting those numbers will give you your total audience target in the yellow cell there, and then your average ticket yield in the white cell. Um, and that's the average ticket yield you'll negotiate with your venue. And so altogether, that'll give you your box office income. So a little further down, there may also be program or publication sales, and that altogether that will calculate the total box office and program/publication sales income down there at the lowest row there. Okay, and then you have just below that non-box office income, and this is income towards your proposal other than box office income. And that can come from local authority or other public funding or international funding, or if you're getting cash income from other production partners. If you're doing a sponsorship or fundraising, if any, you can input that there. Or if you're getting a guarantee from a production partner or a venue, you can input that so that that can all be calculated. That can all calculate the total non-box office income. And all of this information does need to be evidenced in your letters of support and or your MOUs, your memorandums of understanding. You just can't, it's not that you just sort of input or throw up the numbers there. They do need to be realistic and they need to be evidenced. Okay, and then there is the in-kind income. And we'll talk about that in a minute because that involves tab 2 of the budget template. You don't have to fill that in there, thus the yellow cells. There's an underlying calculation in the yellow cells. So you don't need to fill in any details there. It'll automatically fill in. So when you fill in the in-kind tab, the figures into the in-kind tab, those will automatically be delivered there into that yellow cell in the total value of in-kind income. And then the in-kind income is set against the in-kind expenditure, so they just net each other off. Okay, so cost of sales. This is where it gets a little bit technical. So usually if you're making a show in a venue with a partner, there will be one of three deals. So either you'll be just renting the space. So you'll just put in here how much it is to rent the space. So you would negotiate that with the venue. They say renting the space is this much. You pay that to them, and then you keep all the box office. In that case, you would be paying. That's the case where you'd be paying rental to a venue. Or you do a box office split, and where you do a deal with the venue, you pay them some rental, and then they do a discount, and they say that we'll go ahead and take something off the box office. The venue says that. Or it might be a guarantee where they pay you a set guarantee, and then they keep the box office. So there are inevitably going to be little nuances to that, but generally those are the three possibilities. Even if you're getting a guarantee from a venue. And so even if no one shows up and you still get that guarantee money, we still need to know the audience targets. We still need to understand the thinking that was behind the deal you made with the venue, how many people you're expecting, because we need to know that you've had that conversation with the venue and that you've both thought about what would be the audience for this particular show. More often than not, your expectation for the size of the audience attending will differ from what the venue's expectations are for the size of the audience. And it's just about working out with the venue a realistic target for how many people are expected to see the show. It's about us understanding the thinking of what went into that deal. Um, and then you have other costs like authors' royalties, credit card commissions, program sales, if there is one, and that will give you the total cost of sale. And then that will give you your net income. That's basically the money that's coming into you for the project. Um, and here, just to kind of draw your attention again to that notes section, that notes comment section to the right there, um, that I first showed you a couple of slides before. That section is your friend, where you can explain where a particular figure came from, and that is being evidenced in letters of support, so that you're really being clear about the feasibility of your proposal. Okay, and then expenditure. So yeah, sorry, just to say that real quickly, the difference between the income that you're getting and the expenditure, the cost of what it is, the cost of what it is you're proposing, that difference will be the subsidy that you're seeking from us, from the Arts Council. Okay, so expenditure. And again, this goes into quite a lot of detail. There's a lot of line items there. So there are lines for fees for dramaturg's fees, set designer's fee, sound designer's fee, um, choreographer's fee, movement, fight choreographer, intimacy director's fee. So we basically have listed everything we could think of. You may not be using a lot of these people, so if you're not, don't worry, you don't need to worry about inputting anything. If it's not relevant to you, you don't have to fill it in. Okay, and then you come down to wages here. So you've got the cast wages per week. And that's a really important number because we want to understand at a basic level how much actors are being paid in general, because those are really useful benchmarks for us to understand the way that the work is being made and the way that the work is being thought about. So you have cast wages per week. And just note, cast wages may not be the same for everyone across your ensemble. So you'll just need to kind of look across what's being paid for the ensemble and average the wage, and then input that into the per week cell there. And again, like you may be, if you're doing a strand one or a strand two, well, particularly a strand two, if you're devising, you might be using different people at different stages of the devising process. So the pay may be different. So you just need, depending on kind of at which stage you're at in the devising process. So you may want to, you'll probably have to create an average of the wages for that and input it into the per week cell there. Um, so here's just a little tip. You'll notice that in the stage manager wage and the ASM wage, there isn't a euro sign, um, like there is beside the stage director and cast wages. So if you have a stage director only, uh, and you don't have a stage manager or an ASM, just leave these blank. Don't put in zero, just leave them blank. If you put in zero, otherwise it will calculate them as factors and will average all of these together. So that's why they don't have euro signs. If you're not using them, just leave them blank. Uh, and then you might have rehearsal or there's your rehearsal or development costs here, which will automatically calculate based on the numbers section above. Same with the performance, and then that all totals out in that orange column there. Um, so those yellow cells are where the figures are automatically calculated. Regarding things like employers' PRSI, pension contributions, etc., we can't advise on that. We're not the arbiters of that. We assume that everyone who is applying for government money is going to be tax and compliant and has looked into that. Um, there has been a tightening of the understanding within the Revenue Commission what should constitute a wage position and what constitute a fee-based position. What we would say is you would need to check in with your producer partner, with Irish Theatre Institute, with the Revenue Commissioner to get more information on that. We can't be a proxy regulator for that. Um, Irish Theatre Institute and Performing Arts Forum, they've done a ton of work on this, so do contact them on details for that. And ultimately, it's the applicant who is responsible for managing tax. So do get in touch with ITI, get in touch with Performing Arts Forum, get in touch with the Revenue Commissioner to get information on that, and they can help you out. Okay, and technical costs. All different line items there if you want to or need to use that. Down at the bottom, there's a weekly running cost for wardrobes and props, and that's calculated using the rehearsal weeks, um, performance weeks, rehearsal weeks, performance weeks. Um, that's those calculations are drawn in from the numbers section above. So if you input a per week cost into those white cells, they'll automatically calculate into the orange cells there. And then the total will be calculated in the yellow cell in the total technical costs row. Okay. So promotion, publicity, and engagement. We've tried to give as many line items as possible here. One thing that can tend to happen is that if there are any issues with the budget, it's the PR portion of the budget that could tend to get trimmed. Um, so you need to think about the balance between how much money you'll spend publicizing the show and how many people you want to see the show. You really need to think about how you're going to get the word out. And if you want to hit box office targets, you really need to invest in your publicity. And we just need to understand that you've thought about this. So talk to people about it, talk to resource organizations and venues about it, talk to ITI and Performing Arts Forum about it. Um, don't think, all right, well, I've spent a lot above, so I'll try to save some money here in promotion, publicity, and engagement. It costs what it costs. You'll need to spend to get the word out there for your show so that you can hit those audience targets that you've set. Um, and then you have audience disability access costs. This is the cost of making your activities accessible to audiences as a normal part of your work. Right now, audience disability access costs are part of the funding ask, are part of the funding that you're asking for, and they're considered a normal part of your work. So you'll need to give us a breakdown in a separate document, a summary of how you arrived at the audience disability access costs figure. You can find a template for that at the Arts Council website. And again, if you're having trouble finding it, just contact us at theatre@artscouncil.ie and we can direct you. Okay, administration costs. Again, if you're working with a company or a venue or a creative production support, they may already be able to support you administratively. But if you're working on your own, you may need to hire an administrator or bring someone on to help you out with that. The big one here is going to be the audit fees. So you're required to give us an income and expenditures report at the end of your project. And if the costs of your project are over 25,000 euro, you need an auditor to sign off on that. So you have to allow those audit fees as a cost as part of your project. And also like if the project that you're doing is under 25,000, you don't need to include audit fees if the amount that you're applying for is under 25,000. Travel costs. There are two line items there for travel for administration purposes and travel costs for any personnel that aren't normally resident where the proposed activity is taking place. So if you are based in Galway and you're having someone traveling in from Dublin, then you may include that cost there. However, if you're looking for travel and accommodation costs for productions that are paying for more than one venue, then this is where you'll want to itemize those costs And just to point out, like if you do have if you are paying for cast and crew accommodation and cast and crew travel, you want to think about per diems. Um, it would read poorly in an application if per diems weren't included. So you can place those in the other field there, other travel and accommodation costs, and you can note that in the empty field there. Okay, and then number seven, there are personal disability access costs where relevant. So personal disability access costs are costs that are on top of the amount you're asking for. They're costs that support you or artists that you're working with, uh, access costs to support in the making of the work. This is uh, audience disability access costs are separate to this. Audience disability access costs are included in the funding of the project, the funding you're asking for a project. Whereas personal disability access costs are on top of that. They're a separate ask, basically. Um, there again, there will be a template where you can outline those costs. Um, and you can find that on artscouncil.ie. Again, if you're having trouble finding it, get in touch with us at theatre@artscouncil.ie and we'll direct you to it. Okay, and then contingency. And rule of thumb for this is about 5%, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, just depending on the project. And in the notes section, you just need to tell us how you arrived at that percentage. And we do expect to see a contingency. It just gives us an idea that you thought about, okay, would just be giving yourself a little bit of flexibility, to anticipate that there may be changes in the process of putting the project on its feet or developing the project. And ultimately, everybody does end up spending their contingency. It's usually something that does get absorbed into another cost. Okay, and then lastly, at the very bottom, this is where all of your figures are automatically calculated, the total expenditure, total net income, uh, and this is where the funding amount requested is calculated. And then if you are applying for personal disability access costs, the last row here calculates the amount requested less the personal disability access costs. So that's that there. And we'll move on to tab two, to the in-kind income. So in-kind income could be anything from like discount with the venue rentals or venue helping you with the credit card commission, or there's some sort of production support. So we just need you to put a value on that support. And of course, there's the column for value figure there for the value of the in-kind support that you're receiving. Um, so the reason for putting a value on that is that one, it helps us to understand that you've had conversations with potential partners, and that you've thought about the feasibility of that. Um, and two, that it's clear that you've gone to get the help that you need to make the proposal more feasible. And it helps us to understand the hidden costs of making work and to get an insight into how funding organization over here is helping to make independent work over here. Um, so the total value of in-kind support that is automatically totaled at the bottom there, that automatically gets fed back into the first tab, into the budget detail tab. And then tab three, which is the summary. So there isn't a field or a cell to fill in here. Everything gets automatically calculated into the summary. So this is a good place to get an overview of all the costs that you've detailed in the budget detail tab. It's a good place for you to double check, to look to see if there are any figures that might seem off to you, which would indicate, okay, there's something going on in the budget detail that I've missed or that I've put a figure in wrong or something like that. So it's a good opportunity for you to review and just to double check for yourself that all the figures are coming out the way that you expected them to. It also serves, if your project does get funded, it also serves as the basis for which you will submit a revised budget to draw down um, your first bit of funding. So that is it. If after watching this you still have questions, of course, please get in touch with us at theater@artscouncil.ie. There's a lot going on in the budget, the theater budget template. So there may be questions that you don't feel were answered here or you just need more clarity on. So do get in touch with us and we'll do our best to help out. All right. Thanks for watching.